Okay, so before this we were able to talk a bit more about decorators and we saw how they work. So we had an idea of how decorator probably works and I assume that you got it. So now we have our previous code written back, which is the class which says person, the person class which has a say hi property, and then we have the logger. The logger is actually right now on the property rather than on a method of this class. Now do note, I actually changed that logger back to the default logger that we had. This logger is not a factory decorator. That means the logger won't actually take any arguments. And for the sake of simplicity, like going further in the tutorial, I want to make sure that the logger that you're seeing is fairly simple as compared to more complex ones that are derived from the factory decorators, of course. So the default decorator that we have right now is something like this. Now let's talk a bit more about the logger being used in the properties. So right now I have, if I was to like run this, and we get that the target is constructor say hi and the key, that is name. Now the key is name because the logger is actually on top of this public property. Now I want to point you to something quite peculiar here, is that the target array doesn't really contains a name property. All it contains is a constructor and the say hi. Now just in case if you're wondering what was to happen if I was to create a constructor here, so the thing is that that constructor is going to be taken by default. So if I was to do something like this, and yeah, something like this, and if I was to do a yarn start again, you're going to see that we're just going to have one constructor, not two. So yeah, this constructor, as I told you, is created by default by JavaScript for you. So no matter what you do, the constructor will forever be present in a class. Now what do I want to talk about this, and why do I want to talk about this? Is the reason is that the target here is rather, as I told you, is the prototype, not the class itself. That means this thing which is present in the class won't be present in the prototype, because prototypes only inherit methods, not properties. That means if I come down here and if I was to say something like, let's say, let me just log this, and as I told you, if this was the class, if I was to do a target.key, that thing would actually fire this. So that thing will actually trigger this, would I say the say hi function, if I was to place this logger here, of course. But if this thing was to present up here in the logger on the name property, this should log John, right? Because the target will actually contain that key, right? You're getting the idea, right? The target here points to the prototype. And let's just assume for a while that it doesn't point to the prototype, but rather to this class. So if I was to log like person.name, I should probably get John. So that means this target thing will actually contain the key or the instance that was created, and that means this name would also be accessible, right? So if I was to do something like this, if I was to say yarn start and then run it, what do you think I would get? Well, we were expecting John, but all we got is undefined. So let's do something else. How about I make it static, right? If I was to make it static, that should probably do, right? And unfortunately, this will actually trigger a lot of things because this name property is now being accessed here. So let's just do it this way, is that I can get rid of this. So if I was to come here and just say someone says hi, and the name is actually present in the function itself. So let's just do something like, let's say first name. That should do, right? Now, if I was to come down here and I was to log like person.firstName, what do you think would be the output? I'm just commenting out the logger. This is just pure simple JavaScript for you. What do you think would be the output? Now, I would say most of you would probably say like, yeah, it's going to be John because that's a static property, right? Now, if I was to try accessing these, now if you're going to see like the logger is going to say quite a lot of things because we haven't got it defined yet. Now, if I was to do something like this again, so assuming that what this is going to print, this is actually going to print the name John, right? Not the John, but the first name that I'm assuming here. So let's try doing yarn start. But what do you think about the lower one? So now if you see, the thing that we get is the target.key is undefined. And that's what I want to talk about. Now, why target.key comes to be undefined? So I just changed it like this. I just named the log to target.key so that we can actually pinpoint what exactly we're dealing with. So let's just get rid of that, and let's get rid of that. So the idea here is that this thing or this target here is not the object itself or not an instance of this class, but rather the prototype of this function or this class. So that is one thing that you need to know. Okay, now that we have that done, let's talk about something else. And the thing that I want to talk about in this video majorly is the types of decorators. So I won't be exactly going into details in all of them. I won't be talking about every single one of them right now in this video. I promise I would come like further in the videos down. We'll probably talk a bit more about these, but for now, let's just keep ourselves exploring the different types of decorator that we have. So as you can see, we can use this function decorator, normal decorator that we have in any of the methods or properties. Generally, it's not recommended to use decorators in the properties because what's possibly you're going to do with them. But we still like to use decorators when we're talking about methods, about different classes and all sort of that stuff. But let's talk about different types of decorators that we have. The other possible decorator that we have is going to be a class decorator. So let's just use a class decorator. And the first argument that a class decorator receives is the constructor. So constructor, and it's going to be of type function. So as you already know, constructors, or I should say classes, are not actually present in JavaScript. JavaScript actually works with something called prototypical inheritance, and through which we can actually know that the function that we're going to get, or the first argument that we're going to get, would be the constructor of this class. What do I mean by that? Let's just simply try logging it. So if I log the constructor, and I'm not getting any auto suggestions, and let's go to the top and use the class decorator right here. Okay. So if I was to run this one more time, as I told you, all the decorators are going to run at the moment this class is declared. So it's going to run immediately without even creating an instance of that class. So if I was to do a yarn start, you're going to see that all we get is a class person declaration. So that means this thing can be used to now like create an instance out of this function. You might be thinking, wait, how can we possibly use this? Well, in the future, I would possibly show you a lot of things about this, and this actually has quite a lot of potentials when it comes around to working with libraries like Express, backend libraries, ORMs, or something like this. But yeah, I assume you already know where these things might be used. Now, the other thing I want to talk about would be a argument decorator, and they are, again, used a lot in frameworks like Nestjs. So let's just do a Args Decorator. I mean, what's the best thing of calling it? So an argument decorator takes in a few things as well. So we're going to have a target property that's going to be of type any, the key that's going to be of type string, and then an index that's going to be of type number. So let's try to log everything in here. So let's just log in the target, and what I'm going to do is that I'm going to follow the same stuff here, is that I'm going to make sure that we get what we're logging. Right? So let's just print it 3 times, and let's just print in key here, and whoops. Let's print key and the index, and again we're going to print in the index here. So you might be wondering, wait, how is this thing possibly used? And the reason how we the good idea of how we use them would be right here. We use them like Args Decorator, and then we use the name. So let's just say that it says let's just call it name, and this is of type string, right? So that's one way of using the Args Decorator, and I bet you have seen something like this if you have used decorators before. So we can again use the Args Decorator, and let's say age, and it's going to be of type number. And now let's simply try and log what's the output of this. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to just get rid of all these logs that I'm getting here because I don't want to see them right now. The only thing that I want to see is this one. So let's just do a yarn start, and we're going to see that the target right now is coming out to be an empty object, and I guess you already know why is that, but I want to pinpoint 2 things here. You see that we're getting index 1 and index 0, and why might that be? Can you guess it? And if you are not able to, then let me tell you that these index actually point out to the way of or how these arguments decorators were called. So this index 0 is actually coming right from here, and this index 1 is actually coming right from here. Now again, if you're asking why in the world would someone like to use these, when there are some use cases we might probably use. So these are quite a few types of decorators that we have, and that's exactly what I wanted to talk in this video. The first one that we talked about was the class or the logger or the simple function or the method decorator. The second one we talked about was the class decorator, and the third one we talked about today is the argument decorator, and every one of them has their own use cases. Further down the road, we're going to talk about metadata and all sort of that stuff, but yeah, so I mean, this is for this video. I want to make, like as I told you, this is going to be chunks, small videos for you.